Welcome back to the deep dive. Tonight we are doing something a little bit different.
Yeah, we're taking a bit of a detour from our usual format.
Exactly. I want you to imagine, imagine we're turning down the lights. Maybe we're lighting a candle or two. We are stepping into a time machine and setting the dial for a very specific, kind of humid moment in history. We are going back to a Wednesday night in the summer of 1967.
Really sets a mood, doesn't it? I mean, the summer of love is happening outside in the world, but inside this one particular house, something very different is going on.
Right. It's hot. It's humid. We are in a living room in Elmira, New York. And there's a man named Rob sitting there with a pen and a notebook, probably sweating a little bit in the heat. And his wife, Jane, is there. But she's not really there.
She's in a deeply altered state.
Yeah, she's pacing the room. Her voice has changed. Her mannerisms have completely changed. She is speaking, but the words aren't entirely her own.
It sounds kind of like the opening scene of a noir film, or a very specific, very intellectual kind of ghost story.
It really does. But instead of a ghost haunting the attic, we have a personality named Seth, delivering what might be the most intense, chilling, and believe it or not, funny marriage counseling session I have ever read. We are digging into session 352 of the Early Sessions, Book 8 of the Seth material.
Just to orient everyone, because we're dealing with some precise metaphysics here, the date of record is specifically Wednesday, July 12th, 1967. The time is exactly 9:15 p.m. Jane Roberts, who is referred to by Seth as Ruburt, is in a trance state, channeling this energy personality essence known as Seth. And her husband, Robert Butts, is transcribing everything by hand in shorthand.
And before we get into the heavy stuff, and trust me, there is some really heavy stuff here about health, the physics of jealousy, and yes, a cursed pillow. We have to make sure everyone knows the rules of the road. This podcast is distributed free of charge on all major platforms for educational purposes.
Absolutely. Our goal here is to explore these concepts, unpack the wisdom, and see how it actually applies to our lives today. We aren't here to push a belief system. We're here to look at the psychological insights, which are, frankly, staggering when you break them down.
So let's talk about the mission for this deep dive, because on the surface, if you just glance at the transcript of this session, it basically looks like a conversation about Jane feeling sick. She is under the weather. She's having some vague physical symptoms.
It definitely starts there, yes. Jane is ill. But Seth, being Seth, doesn't just say, take 2 aspirin and call me in the morning. He uses her illness as a jumping off point to dissect the entire energetic environment of their house.
Which is wild.
It is. He talks about how our physical furniture holds emotional charges, how jealousy can literally change your physiology, and why sometimes getting sick is actually a brilliant defense mechanism to keep us from completely shutting down emotionally.
And of course, the highly specific advice at the very end regarding a certain item of bedding that just, I don't know, it creeps me out a little bit.
Oh, the pillow. We will definitely get to the pillow. It is a masterclass in object psychometry.
But first, I have to give the mandatory shout out. If you find this conversation fascinating and you need to go to the source, we are just scratching the surface here today. You should absolutely study the Seth material books yourself. You can find them at the publisher, New Awareness Network. Go to sethcenter.com/the early sessions to dig in.
It's dense, rich material. Highly recommended if you really want the full picture of what was going on in that living room.
Okay, let's unpack this. Seth opens the session with a bit of an I told you so moment. Jane, or Ruburt, as Seth calls her, is sick. And Seth basically says, hey, if you had just gone on vacation like I suggested a while ago, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now.
Right. It sounds like a travel agent's pitch at first. But it's actually physics. Seth says, and I'm quoting here, the suggested vacation would have broken up the last of Rubert's symptoms more quickly than your present course.
I feel like literally everyone has had that thought at some point. I just need to get away. But usually we think of a vacation as just resting your body. Lying on a beach, turning off your brain, drinking a margarita. But Seth is arguing for something much more specific here, isn't he? It's not just about taking a nap.
No, it's not about relaxation in the traditional physical sense. He's introducing the concept of a charged environment. This is absolutely fascinating. Seth argues that their home isn't just a collection of wood and drywall and paint. It is filled with charged items.
Charged with what? Exactly, because we're obviously not talking about static electricity here.
Charged with emotion.
Yeah.
Charged with history.
Yeah.
Seth explains that they have been struggling against an environment in which many items have been charged. Think about it. Every argument you've ever had in the kitchen, every single moment of stress you felt at your desk, every time you've cried on the sofa. Seth implies that this energy doesn't just vanish into the ether once the moment passes. It sticks. It adheres to the physical environment.
So the walls are listening, or rather, the walls are remembering.
In a sense, yes. It's like the environment itself becomes a battery for your past emotional states. And if those states were negative, like stress, jealousy, or fear, the house is literally broadcasting that signal back at you 24 hours a day.
That is a deeply terrifying thought. You're sitting in your favorite chair, trying to watch TV and relax, but the chair is secretly reminding your subconscious of that massive fight you had 3 years ago.
Exactly. And that's exactly why the vacation matters. It's not just about the beach or the hotel room. It's about physically removing the person from the geographic triggers. Seth says the vacation would have automatically given you freedom from these daily charged items of environment, allowing the symptoms to break up completely without the added resistance.
That makes so much sense when you put it like that. You leave the house and suddenly you don't feel that low-level hum of anxiety anymore. You're not looking at the pile of bills on the kitchen table or the spot on the rug where you spilled coffee during a major life crisis. You remove the environmental resistance, and the body can finally do what it inherently knows how to do, which is heal.
Precisely. When you remove the resistance of the environment, the body's natural regenerative capabilities take over completely. But, and here's the kicker for this whole session, they didn't go on vacation.
Of course not. That would be entirely too easy for them. So they are doing it the hard way.
They are staying in the charged environment and trying to change the charge from the inside out. Seth notes that this method is somewhat more difficult, but will prove effective.
It sounds exhausting just thinking about it. You're sick, you're tired, you're feverish, and now you have to essentially perform an energetic exorcism on your own living room while you're trying to sleep in it.
Well, Seth actually warns them about the side effects of this exact approach. He says, working with the charged environment in this manner can cause various flare-ups. It's a lot like when you start cleaning a really messy closet or a garage. In the process of organizing, you actually make a much bigger mess first. You kick up dust, you sneeze, you find things you didn't want to see or deal with.
Oh, totally. You pull everything out onto the floor and suddenly you're completely overwhelmed. You have to create chaos to create order.
Right. Seth promises these flare-ups disappear immediately as the changes continue. But you have to be willing to go through the storm to get to the clear skies. And this leads to one of the funniest, yet most profound practical tips in the entire session. Seth pivots completely to domestic chores.
This is hands down my favorite part. You have this infinite consciousness speaking through a human vessel, discussing the unseen secrets of the universe, and suddenly he's like, hey, go clean the bathroom.
It is genuinely humorous, but it's completely consistent with his theory of charged items. Seth says, when Ruburt's work is done in the bathroom and bedroom, there will be another marked improvement.
So scrubbing the toilet is a spiritual act now.
If the toilet or the bathroom in general is charged with negative energy or neglect, yes, absolutely. Think about the bathroom conceptually. It's where we inspect our physical bodies, where we often feel sickness first, where we look at ourselves in the mirror. If that room is dirty or disorganized, it reinforces the psychological feeling of a lack of control. Reclaiming physical space is a direct way of reclaiming psychic space. If you're living in a charged environment, scrubbing the floors is literally scrubbing away the old psychic energy.
I really love that perspective. It takes all the drudgery out of housework. I'm not just cleaning the grout, I'm breaking up my physical symptoms. I'm doing high alchemy with a bottle of Windex.
It empowers you. You aren't a victim of your messy house anymore. You are an alchemist, changing the composition of your environment. You are actively neutralizing the negative charge.
Okay, so the environment is the stage. We've established that the house is haunting them with their own accumulated stress. But now let's look at the actors on that stage. Why is Jane sick in the first place? Rob, the husband, asks the million-dollar question. He asks, is he covering up anything else?
Rob is definitely worried. He's looking for the smoking gun here. He wants to know if there is a deeper, darker secret behind Jane's illness. And Seth dives incredibly deep into the emotional dynamics of their marriage. This is where it gets really interesting for anyone interested in psychology and relationships.
Seth diagnoses the core issue as a profound need for love, which sounds kind of simple, right? All you need is love. It's a Beatles song.
But it's highly nuanced. It's not just a general love me sentiment. Seth says Jane needs active proclamations of love and affection. She needs reassurance. She needs to hear it spoken out loud. But, and here's the major paradox, she is completely terrified of asking for it.
Why? If you clearly need love, why not just ask your husband for a hug?
Because she deeply fears smothering Rob.
Oh, the classic dynamic of, I want you to love me, but I don't want to force you to love me, because if I force you, then it doesn't count.
Precisely. Seth explains it perfectly. He says, He fears that you will feel forced to give him more love than you want to. Jane is caught in a psychological trap of her own making. She desperately wants the affection, but she's afraid that if she asks for it, Rob will feel suffocated by her needs. And if Rob feels suffocated, he'll naturally resent her. And if he resents her, any love he gives will be fake or obligatory.
It's a total catch-22. And where does this specific fear come from? Is it just Jane being naturally insecure? Or did Rob do something historically to make her feel this way?
Seth actually traces it directly back to Rob. He says this fear is partially a leftover from his realization of your feelings of jealousy.
Whoa. So Rob's past jealousy essentially created an environment where Jane felt she had to walk on eggshells?
Exactly that. At some point in the past, Rob struggled with jealousy. And jealousy is a very demanding emotion. It takes up a lot of energetic space in a room. It restricts the other person. Rob's jealousy made Jane feel like she had to minimize her own emotional needs just to keep the peace in the house. She shrank herself to avoid triggering his insecurities. And that shrinking, that intense emotional constriction, eventually manifested as physical illness.
It's incredible how interconnected it all is. We usually think of jealousy as just an emotion, a fleeting feeling you have, and then it passes. Oh, I was a little jealous that night. But Seth is saying it laid the actual physical groundwork for biological symptoms years later.
And speaking of physical symptoms, this brings us to one of the most fascinating details in this entire session. Rob mentions a tremor in his hand.
Yes. This part gave me actual chills when I read it. Rob says, "Last night, my pendulum told me my hand developed a tremor as a result of this jealousy."
And Seth completely confirms it. But listen closely to the explanation Seth gives. It is an absolute masterclass in somatic psychology, the study of how the body speaks the mind's language. Seth says, the tremor in your hand began when the jealousy began to take hold. You felt you had a shaky hold then, and that the foundations of your work and married life were shaky.
A shaky hold.
It is entirely literal.
That is wild. We use these metaphors all the time in everyday conversation. I feel like I'm losing my grip. My knees are weak. It's a pain in the neck. My heart is breaking.
And Seth is suggesting that the body literally listens to those metaphors. The subconscious mind and the body don't know the difference between a metaphorical shaky hold on a relationship and a literal shaky hold on a pen. Rob felt his emotional grip on his marriage was shaky, so his physical hand literally began to shake. The body acted out the psychological reality.
It really makes you want to be very careful about the words you use to describe your life and your feelings.
It certainly does. Language isn't just descriptive, it's physically formative. Rob's tremor wasn't a random neurological misfire. It was a direct physical manifestation of his emotional insecurity. He was literally vibrating with fear.
So we have Jane sick because she's afraid to ask for love, and Rob shaking because he's afraid of losing Jane. It's this massive feedback loop of mutual fear.
A feedback loop that resulted in Jane running away, but not physically running away.
Right. Seth talks about this concept of retaliation. Jane sensed Rob's jealousy, so she emotionally shut down. She stopped being spontaneous and open.
Seth says Ruburt, sensing your jealousy, ran away and would not be deeply touched. It was a classic defense mechanism. If you don't let yourself feel deeply, you can't be hurt when the other person inevitably pulls away or gets angry. You build an invisible wall.
But shutting down like that is dangerous.
It is deadly to the human spirit, and this is where Seth drops what I think is the most profound psychological insight of the entire session. He reframes Jane's illness completely.
Let's hear it. Because normally we think of illness as a failure of some kind. I failed to take care of myself. I let the stress get to me. My immune system failed.
Seth argues that Jane's physical symptoms were actually a compromise, a middle ground.
A compromise between what and what?
Between physical health and total emotional death. Seth says the alternative to the physical symptoms would have been a complete closing out.
What does a complete closing out actually look like in this context?
It means Jane would have become a complete empty shell, an animated but empty one, as Seth puts it. She would have shut Rob out completely to protect herself from his jealousy. She would have stopped caring, stopped loving, stopped engaging in the marriage entirely. She would have basically become a zombie walking through the house, just going through the motions.
Wow, so getting sick was a choice, a better choice.
Seth explicitly says his symptoms were adopted in place of such a move. He literally thought too much of you to do the other.
That is heartbreaking and beautiful at the exact same time. Jane loved Rob too much to become a zombie. She loved him too much to emotionally abandon the marriage, so she subconsciously took on the physical symptoms instead. The illness was actually a sign that she was still trying, still fighting to keep the relationship alive. She chose to feel physical pain rather than feel absolutely nothing.
It turns the whole modern concept of sickness on its head. The illness wasn't the core problem. The illness was the emergency solution to a much worse problem, which was the death of their emotional bond. It acted as a pressure valve for the psyche.
He literally thought too much of you to do the other. That just hits so hard. It really shows the sheer complexity of the human subconscious. We do these intense things to our own biology to save our relationships. We sacrifice our physical bodies to save our hearts.
And this leads Seth to give a bit of a character study on Jane to help Rob understand her better. He talks extensively about her loyalty.
He calls it deep and unswerving, which perfectly fits with the idea that she'd rather be bedridden and sick than leave Rob emotionally.
Seth actually mentions that this loyalty has spanned several existences. They are dealing with a bond that goes way beyond just this one lifetime in 1967. They are old souls playing a very complex new game.
But there's a specific dynamic to Jane's energy that Seth highlights here. He says Jane demands very little physically. She's not a materialistic person at all, but she demands a luxurious sense of inner love.
Luxurious. I really love that specific word choice. It implies abundance. It implies complete safety. Jane doesn't need fancy cars or diamonds or a giant house. She needs to feel absolutely bathed in affection. She needs to feel like there is an infinite, unending supply of love available to her from Rob.
And when she feels that, when she gets that luxurious love,
Seth says, given this, his energy on your behalf and in your behalf knows no bounds. When Jane feels completely secure, she is an absolute powerhouse. She can move mountains. She is creative, dynamic, unstoppable. And here's the dangerous flip side if she feels that love is being withdrawn.
her energy just crashes.
His secure confidence is shattered and his energy dwindles. It creates what Seth calls an implosive hole.
An implosive hole. That sounds terrifying, honestly.
It's the exact opposite of an explosion. Instead of energy radiating outward into the world, it collapses inward on itself. It drains everything around it. It sucks the light and the life right out of the room. That's what the physical illness is. It's an energy implosion caused by a severe lack of emotional security.
It really emphasizes how much we actively affect our partners. We think we're just having a bad day or being a little distant because of work. But for someone with Jane's specific personality type, that casual distance can trigger a massive implosion.
And that brings us to the interplay between their two specific personalities. Because they're very different people. They aren't clones of each other at all.
Definitely not. Seth describes them as almost complete opposites in how they function.
He calls Jane's natural temperament explosive. High energy, incredibly creative, perhaps a bit volatile at times. She is fire. And Rob. Rob is the more regulated pattern.
The rock, the steady anchor in the storm.
Seth says, without each other, your possibilities for fulfillment would have been far less. It wasn't a cosmic accident that they found each other. They made the ideal choices. This is soul-level matchmaking at its finest.
I love that idea. But how does this dynamic work practically on a Tuesday afternoon? Why does the fire need the rock?
Think about it energetically. Explosive energy is amazing to witness. But without direction or boundaries, it burns itself out. It scatters in a million directions. It can even be highly destructive. Rob's regulated pattern provides the necessary container for Jane's explosion. Seth says Rob adds sustenance to Jane when her energy is running low.
So Rob is basically the battery charger for her.
Or the containment field. He is the stone hearth that safely holds the roaring fire. Seth notes, you have often kept him from being hurt by over-involvement. Rob pulls Jane back when she's about to go completely off the rails or give too much of herself away. He provides the crucial boundaries.
But then what does Jane do for Rob? Because nobody wants to just be a containment field. That sounds incredibly boring and passive.
Jane brings the heat. She brings the color. Seth says, his explosive energy adds vitality and variety to your more evenly regulated pattern. Rob might be too rigid, too safe, too gray without Jane in his life. She forces him to feel deeply, to experience wonder, to see colors and dimensions he wouldn't ever see on his own.
It's the classic fire and earth dynamic. Fire desperately needs earth so it doesn't burn the whole forest down. Earth needs fire so it doesn't completely freeze over.
Precisely. It is a perfect balance.
Yeah.
But the major problem arose when the earth started shaking.
The tremor, the shaky hold.
Right. Jane relied entirely on Rob's regulated foundation. That was her ultimate safety net. She knew she could explode creatively because Rob was always there to catch her. But when Rob became jealous, when he became fundamentally insecure, remember the shaky hold on the pen? Jane lost her faith in that foundation.
And that's exactly when the panic set in. If the solid rock is shaking, where do you even stand?
Exactly. Seth says, it was this foundation he lost faith in that so frightened him. The illness was a direct biological reaction to the ground giving way beneath her feet. If the one stable thing in your entire life starts vibrating with insecurity, you have absolutely nowhere to land safely.
It's such a powerful lesson for all relationships. We often think we just need to be strong for ourselves, but sometimes our emotional stability is the literal only thing holding our partner together.
And vice versa. It is a deeply symbiotic ecosystem. You simply cannot disturb one part of the system without affecting the whole.
Okay, so we've covered the really heavy emotional stuff. We've covered the cosmic personality profiles. We've done the deep psychological shadow work. Now, I want to pivot to the part of the session that made me actually laugh out loud in my office and then shudder a little bit.
You are talking about the pillow.
I am absolutely talking about the pillow. We are right in the middle of this profound, sweeping psychological deep dive, talking about ancient soul connections and dangerous energy implosions. And suddenly, Seth hits the brakes and starts talking about bedding.
It is incredibly jarring, isn't it? It just shows how hyper-practical Seth can be when he wants to. He says, I believe the small bed pillow used by Ruburt has a connection with your mother and should not be used.
It's so jarringly specific. The small pillow he uses beneath his regular bed pillow. Not just any random pillow in the house, that specific little one.
And the verdict from Seth is extremely swift. It should not be used.
But why? Because it's uncomfortable, because it's bad for her neck alignment. Is it just non-ergonomic?
No, not at all. It is strictly because of its connection with your mother.
The dreaded mother-in-law curse.
In a very real way, yes.
Yeah.
This circles all the way back to the core idea of charged items we discussed at the very beginning of the deep dive. This pillow isn't just fabric and goose feathers. It is a physical storage device for emotional data. And apparently, the emotional data associated with Rob's mother was negative or conflicting enough that it was actually affecting Jane's physical health while she slept.
This is the part that really gets under my skin. We sleep on these things. We put our unprotected faces on them for 8 hours every single night. If a physical object is radiating mother-in-law stress directly into your brain, that cannot be good for your cycle.
It's a well-documented esoteric concept called psychometry, the idea that inanimate objects can absorb and transmit energetic information. If that specific pillow was given by the mother during a highly stressful time, or if it simply reminds Jane of a difficult dynamic every single time she looks at it, it acts as a constant low-level psychic attack.
It's basically like sleeping on a subliminal message tape that says, you're not good enough, or I disapprove of you playing on a loop all night.
Exactly. And because it's in the bedroom, which is a place of ultimate vulnerability, your conscious defenses are totally down. The negative message goes straight into the subconscious mind.
And what's wild is Seth doesn't say, go wash it. He doesn't say, put a new, clean pillowcase on it. He doesn't say, burn white sage over it to clear the aura. He flat out says, don't use it.
Just get rid of the charge entirely. Sometimes you simply cannot clean the energy of an object. You just have to physically remove the object from your space. It's healing via addition by subtraction.
I can just picture Rob and Jane sitting there in the living room looking at each other like, okay, well, the little pillow goes in the trash tonight.
It is humorous on the surface, but it underscores just how incredibly thorough Seth is in his analysis. He's looking at the macro, the multi-life soul connection, and the micro, the decorative throw pillow. Nothing is considered irrelevant if it affects the energetic baseline of the home.
So after the great pillow revelation, Rob seems to have a real moment of heavy self-reflection. He's feeling pretty guilty about all this. He's sitting there thinking, I made my wife sick with my jealousy, and my mother's haunted pillow is ruining her sleep.
He really is feeling it. He asks Seth, I can't help wondering what I have been offering him lately, other than negative and jealous thoughts.
Which is incredibly sad. He's realizing that his shaky hold directly contributed to Jane's physical sickness. He feels like a failure as a partner.
But Seth doesn't let him wallow in that guilt for long. This is what I truly love about the expert voice of Seth as a teacher. He is deeply compassionate. He tells Rob, you have always offered a deep love. You have always offered a spiritual rapport and support.
He intentionally validates the good stuff. He points out that the foundation they built is still there.
He does. He reminds Rob that the negative stuff, the temporary jealousy, was just a surface layer on top. It undermined the support temporarily, but it didn't completely erase it. The core of their marriage is still solid rock.
And then Seth gives Rob this truly beautiful metaphor to hold on to. He talks about rich emotional loam.
Yes, loam is soil. Rich, fertile, dark, nutrient-dense soil. It's the exact stuff that makes massive gardens grow. Seth tells Rob that his specific personality provides the rich emotional loan that Jane needs to grow and thrive.
That is just pure poetry. Rob isn't just the boring, regulated pattern or the guy with the shaky hand. He is the earth itself for her.
Without that rich soil, Jane's explosive nature would have absolutely nowhere to take root. She couldn't express her deep loyalty or her vibrant vitality in this physical world without Rob there to ground her. Fire definitely needs wood to burn, but fragile flowers need soil to bloom.
Seth even goes so far as to say, without you, literally, Ruburt in this physical life would not be able to express nor free it.
It is the ultimate cosmic validation of their partnership. Despite the illness, despite the periods of jealousy, despite the cursed pillow, they are absolutely necessary to each other's spiritual evolution. They are doing the hard work together.
And that seems to be the ultimate core message here. We aren't just casual roommates with our partners. We are engaged in this incredibly complex, deeply energetic dance.
A dance that involves our entire shared history, our deepest fears, and yes, even our choice of furniture.
So let's try to bring this massive topic in for a landing. We've covered a lot of ground in this session. What are the big, actionable takeaways for our listeners today?
First and foremost, the environment absolutely matters, and not just aesthetically. Your home is a giant battery. It stores energetic resonance. If you are struggling with your physical health or your mood, look critically at your space. Do you need a vacation to temporarily break the circuit? Or do you need to do the hard work of actively cleaning and decluttering to permanently change the charge?
And remember, cleaning the bathroom can literally be a magical act. It's not just physical hygiene, it's energetic hygiene.
Indeed it is. Second takeaway. We have to look closely at the why behind our own behaviors. Jane's illness was a drastic defense mechanism to prevent total emotional shutdown. Sometimes what looks perfectly like self-sabotage is actually desperate self-preservation. We need to be very gentle with ourselves and strive to understand the root cause. Ask yourself, what is this symptom actually protecting me from?
That's a tremendously powerful question to sit with. And the third point.
The essential balance of energy in relationships. We instinctively choose partners who balance our extremes. The explosive needs the regulated. It can definitely be frustrating sometimes. The regulated person feels boring, the explosive person feels chaotic. But that exact tension is where the real soul growth happens. You need each other to become whole. You provide the loam, they provide the seed.
And finally, for the love of everything, check your bedding.
Yes, seriously. If you have a pillow, a blanket, or a piece of furniture that constantly reminds you of a difficult relationship or a deeply bad time in your life, throw it out tonight. Don't wait until tomorrow. Don't literally sleep on bad energy.
That actually brings us to our final thought for the night, and I want to leave you with something to really mull over as you look around your own home right after this.
We talked a lot about the pillow, but Seth strongly implies this principle applies to absolutely everything you own.
Exactly. I want you to look around the room you're in right now. That random chair in the corner, that specific painting on the wall, the coffee mug sitting on your desk.
How many of these mundane items are quietly charged with old, heavy emotions? How many things in your house are secretly draining your daily energy because of a bitter memory or a sad feeling deeply attached to them?
Maybe that comfy old sweater you wear when you're sad is actually keeping you sad. Maybe that specific desk where you sit to pay your bills is holding on to 5 solid years of financial panic and stress.
It's a chilling thought when you really sit with it. We might all be living in haunted houses, but the ghosts aren't dead people floating in the hallway. The ghosts are our own past emotions trapped inside our everyday stuff.
So maybe it's finally time for a little intense energy cleaning this weekend.
I think that is a genuinely great idea for everyone listening.
I want to thank everyone for joining us on this deep dive into 1967. It's always an incredibly wild ride when we look at Seth.
It certainly is. There is always another fascinating layer to peel back.
And please, if you want to support the source of this incredible wisdom, do not stop here. This wisdom comes directly from the Seth material, published by New Awareness Network. They're the ones diligently keeping these books in print, so we can even have these conversations today.
Go to sethcenter.com, the early sessions, buy a book. Read the raw, unedited sessions for yourself. There is so much more profound detail there than we could ever possibly cover in a single sitting.
And one last time, just for the record, this podcast is distributed free of charge on all major platforms for educational purposes. We are simply here to share the wonder with you.
Keep exploring. Stay curious.
And definitely watch out for those charged pillows. Good night, everyone.